The ICU was chaos. Night shift, alarms blaring, a soldier flatlined. The hospital had run out of standard meds. No senior doctor was nearby. Then, a silent woman in gray scrubs stepped forward. No name tag, no lab coat, no authority. She moved with eerie calm, adjusted the ventilator, checked his wrist, and injected something no one else dared to use. The heart monitor beeped. Once, then again. Stabilized. Everyone froze. The chief surgeon looked at her, stunned. "Who taught her to do that?" he whispered. She didn't blink, just replied, "Somewhere with no lights and 4 minutes to live." No one knew, but that night they realized, what if the best medic had no title, only scars from unseen wars? At Fort Clayton Military Medical Center, the night shift had its own rhythm. It was quieter than the day, not because there was less pain, but because there were fewer people to witness it. And in that quiet, unnoticed corner of the hospital moved Draya Velez. She wore no name tag, no embroidered title on her scrubs, just faded gray fabric and a surgical mask that she never removed. Her ID badge listed her as a technical support assistant. Her tasks were supposed to be routine: sterilize instruments, replace IV fluid, restock bandages, reset monitors. Nothing more. Nothing clinical. The young nurses called her the equipment robot, not out of admiration, but mockery. She never talks, never eats with anyone, just moves around like she's been programmed. And yet, no one noticed the pattern. Not at first. The truth was simple but unsettling. Whenever Draya Velez was near, vitals stabilized. Not just once. Not just lucky coincidence. Again and again. One night, a burn victim with erratic oxygen saturation was wheeled into the trauma bay. A junior nurse, panicked, fumbled the monitor cables. The vitals spiked erratically, then began to flatline. Draya stepped in without a word. She didn't correct the nurse. She didn't even speak. She just reconnected the leads, adjusted the pulse ox sensor, and pressed a button sequence on the old auxiliary monitor. Within seconds, the patient's oxygen levels climbed. Smooth, consistent, normal. The nurse muttered, "Must have been a glitch in the machine." But Draya didn't look up. She just walked away, already restocking the crash cart. The staff laughed about her behind her back. "She's like a ghost. Shows up, fiddles with the machines, disappears." But to those paying closer attention, like Corporal Avery, a combat medic recovering from a roadside IED injury, Draya wasn't strange. She was predictable. He watched her one night from his gurney in the hallway, eyes half open. The patient in the next bed had gone into a sudden hypotensive episode. Monitors were screaming. 2 interns were arguing about whether to start a dopamine drip. Draya was already moving. Without a word, she manually recalibrated the IV pressure valve, something most techs wouldn't even know existed. Then she adjusted the angle of the patient's head tilt and restarted the BP monitor. The numbers changed, almost instantly. Avery, who'd served 2 tours, whispered to the nurse tending him, "That woman? She's not tech support. I've seen field medics work like that in Kandahar." The nurse rolled her eyes. "She's not even licensed." But the patient survived. Every night it was the same pattern. Patients in respiratory distress. Draya was there before the alarm sounded. Cardiac monitor malfunctioning. Draya would reset the waveform manually, not with the digital system, but with dials nobody had used in years. And perhaps most tellingly, patients who were spiraling suddenly got better. Nurses thought it was luck. Some thought the systems had finally self-corrected. But there was one constant in all of it. Draya was always nearby. She never corrected anyone. Never asked for thanks. Never claimed credit. The head of night staff, Lieutenant Emerson, once confronted her in frustration. "You need to stop adjusting patient machines without approval." Draya didn't argue. She bowed her head. Understood. But that night, when a child with internal bleeding started convulsing and the junior resident hesitated, Draya moved. She inserted a nasal cannula, performed a suction clear, then adjusted ventilator pressure without touching the main console. The vitals leveled out. Behind closed doors, people started whispering, "How does she know this stuff? She's never wrong about a setting. She never guesses." A young nurse, Maria, once cornered Draya during a supply run. You used to be a nurse, right? Before this? Draya paused, then shook her head. No, not the kind with paperwork. She left it at that. It wasn't until a routine surgical prep failed, monitor systems crashing during an abdominal bleed, that someone really noticed. The monitors showed garbage readings. The anesthesiologist panicked. Draya entered, stood behind the table, and typed a manual override code into a forgotten terminal port on the side of the cart. The readings cleared, heart rate, blood pressure, SpO2, all stabilized. The surgeon looking down at the readout blinked. Who? Who did that? One of the residents pointed to her. The surgeon's brows furrowed. That tech? Draya didn't respond. But for the first time, someone in authority began asking questions. We live in a system obsessed with credentials, certificates on walls, initials after names. But sometimes the most valuable knowledge doesn't come from textbooks. It comes from blood, from dust, from heat and pressure, and no second chances. What happens when someone like Draya, someone forged in fire, walks among those who only know clean halls and controlled procedures? You don't see her until someone flatlines. Then she becomes the only thing keeping them alive. By week's end, several patterns emerged. Vitals stabilized more quickly on her shift. Crash codes dropped by 18%. Response time to distress alerts was fastest when Draya was in the room, and yet, no one could find any advanced certifications in her file. She didn't belong to any nursing board, no medical license, no formal training past a vague technical support course from years ago. And yet, her hands knew what to do when everyone else hesitated. One night, a janitor walking past the trauma bay saw her sitting alone, eyes locked on a heart monitor. The screen was empty, no patient, just test data. She was watching the pulse line curve rise and fall, over and over, like she could hear something in the silence. When he asked her why, she simply said, "I've seen lives turn in half a second. You learn to feel the rhythm before the machine does." They called her a robot, but they were wrong. She wasn't programmed. She was trained, just not here, not in a classroom, not in any place that could be listed on a resume. And one day soon, the hospital would learn that the most valuable person on their team had spent her life working in places that officially didn't exist. It started with a paratrooper. Dropped too fast, landed too hard, pelvic fracture, internal bleeding, collapsed lung. They rushed him into the surgical bay just before midnight. It was one of the most complex trauma cases the team had seen in months. The senior surgical team was already at their limit. An earlier highway accident had flooded their capacity. So Colonel Marcus Hale, head of military medical operations at Fort Clayton, personally scrubbed in. The room was crowded. Beeping monitors, clashing instructions, adrenaline spiking across every corner. And Draya Velez, she stood in the background, barely acknowledged. Her assignment was standard: manage the vital sign displays and equipment trays. Stay out of the way. But when the heart rate monitor began spiking irregularly, above 160 BPM, then flatline, then surge again, Draya moved, quietly, methodically. She reached toward a dusty analog panel mounted near the floor, one that hadn't been touched in years, and made 3 quick adjustments. Then she rotated the ventilator settings in a pattern that wasn't listed in the hospital's current procedure guide. Seconds later, the vitals stabilized, completely. The attending nurse didn't even notice, but Colonel Hale did. He glanced toward her briefly, then back to the screen. Pulse, 92. Oxygen saturation, 98%. Blood pressure, 120/78. "Who made that change?" he asked. Silence. No one answered. No one knew. Draya had already stepped away, cleaning the forceps tray. The surgery finished 37 minutes later, remarkably smooth despite the patient's condition. The soldier's life was saved. The team celebrated quietly, but Hale couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Those settings weren't just effective. They were precise, and more importantly, they weren't in the standard playbook. Later that night, in his private office, Colonel Hale pulled up the raw data feed from the operating room. He cross-referenced the logs, monitor adjustments, ventilator shifts, IV flow modulation. Every manual intervention was time-stamped, and something stood out. Half of the changes weren't logged by the central system. They came from auxiliary equipment, devices most of his staff didn't even know were functional. Worse yet, those changes were synchronized, measured, coordinated. They weren't improvisations. They were protocols, advanced, deliberate, clean. Hale leaned back in his chair, unsettled. These weren't just tweaks. These were battlefield-level calibrations. Something clicked in his memory. A name. A program he hadn't heard in years. He picked up his secure line and dialed a number only used for one purpose. Classified medical consultation. "It's Colonel Hale. I need you to look at something. Right now." 30 minutes later, a retired medical intelligence officer named Dr. Ellis Rourke answered the video call. Wrinkled, worn, but sharp as ever. Hale uploaded the surgical telemetry. Dr. Rourke's eyes narrowed as he scrolled. "Where did this come from?" "Operating room 3, 2 hours ago." "Who was your lead anesthetist?" "Latir Gibson." "But he didn't make those settings." "Then who the hell did?" Hale exhaled. "That's the question." Dr. Rourke looked directly into the camera. "Colonel, this is Specter protocol." Silence. "You're sure?" "Positive. The ventilator override pattern. The IV pressure mod using hand pump assist. Even the microsecond delay in pulse sync alignment. It's all from GTS. Ghost Tactical Surgeon." "Exactly." Colonel Hale stood, pacing. GTS was a classified training program designed during the early 2000s for medics embedded with elite recon units. The training was brutal. Field surgeries under live fire, improvisation with damaged gear, maximum efficiency, minimal equipment. The program was discontinued after a catastrophic breach in 2017. Everyone involved was reassigned. Some discharged, some vanished. But there had always been rumors. One operative, Specter 3, a ghost within a ghost, the only GTS surgeon who never failed a single extraction mission. Unidentified, never photographed, no official identity, just a code name buried in redacted reports. Dr. Rourke leaned in. "If you're seeing these protocols again, Marcus, you've got someone in your hospital who shouldn't be there, or someone who should, but under very different orders." Hale asked quietly, "Specter 3 was never caught. Is that correct?" "No official record, but the legend?" "She walked away. After the Chechnya border collapse. No gear, no backup. Still saved the team." That night, Colonel Hale didn't sleep. He pulled every internal log connected to Draya Velez. Her hiring file was incomplete. No college transcripts, no medical school. Just a background as a civilian tech contractor, filed 3 months before she showed up. And one more thing, a code buried in the metadata of her shift records. GTS 03. His chest tightened. That wasn't a badge number. That was a designation. Ghost Tactical Surgeon 003, Specter 3. There's something terrifying about realizing the person you've been ignoring might be more dangerous and more skilled than anyone in your chain of command. Not because they're hiding, but because they've seen too much to step forward. Draya wasn't pretending. She was surviving. Colonel Hale stared at the code. One hand hovered over the secure line again, but this time he didn't dial. He had a new question now. What would make the world's most advanced battlefield medic disappear and choose to work in silence, in the shadows of an understaffed hospital? No title, no recognition, but he already knew the answer. Because somewhere buried under those gray scrubs and silent glances, Specter 3 hadn't disappeared. She was watching, waiting, still saving lives, still doing what she was trained to do, in places that weren't supposed to exist. Fort Clayton never officially spoke about miracles, but in the next 48 hours they had three. 3 different patients, 3 critical emergencies, 3 outcomes that defied both odds and protocols. Case 1. A middle-aged logistics officer suffered a stroke mid-sentence. His pupils dilated unevenly, and blood pressure dropped in less than a minute. While the attending physician was stuck waiting for confirmation from neurology, Draya Velez adjusted the head tilt, tapped out a pulse sync override, and administered a cold saline flush into the external carotid line. The stroke reversed within 10 minutes. No permanent damage. Case 2. A 9-year-old burn victim with full-thickness injuries suffered sudden hypovolemia. Fluids were running dry, and the child was slipping away. Before the nurse in charge could even call for the senior anesthesiologist, Draya slipped between the crowd, cut open a sealed trauma pack, one most staff hadn't touched in years, and performed a direct manual IV flow adjustment using battlefield clamps. The child's color returned. Case 3. A young Marine had gone into anaphylactic shock from an undiagnosed shellfish allergy. The hospital had run out of standard epinephrine, and the attending doctor was handling 2 simultaneous cardiac events across the hall. Draya didn't hesitate. She went straight to the backup drawer, pulled out an obscure substitute compound, calculated the dosage by memory, and injected it, not into the thigh, like textbooks teach, but into a vascular point at the wrist. The heart monitor stopped free-falling. Stabilized. Dr. Naomi Trent, a recent med school graduate doing her trauma rotation, witnessed the whole thing. She stood frozen, watching Draya pack up the supplies like nothing had happened. Wait, that injection site, that dosage, that response time, she stammered. Where did you learn to do that? Draya looked up, her eyes as calm as her hands. Somewhere with no lights, and 4 minutes to live. That phrase would stay with Naomi Trent for years, because no part of that procedure, no injection path, no compound pairing, no reaction time, had ever been covered in her thousands of hours of training. It wasn't textbook, it was something else, something deeper, sharper, lived. That evening, Colonel Marcus Hale stood at the far end of the break room, watching Draya clean a stack of surgical trays. The way her hands moved, the way she scanned her environment, calculated, subtle, controlled. He didn't speak until the room was empty. Then he approached quietly, like one soldier approaching another. I need to ask you something, he said. Draya didn't look up. Go ahead. Do you recognize the designation? GTS-03? Her hands stopped. For the first time in weeks, she went completely still. She looked up slowly. The look in her eyes didn't match her uniform. It was the look of someone who had survived things that still burned behind her eyelids. A pause. Then, a single, almost imperceptible nod. That was it. No confession, no dramatic reveal. Just an acknowledgement that both of them now knew the truth. Draya Velez was Specter 3, Ghost Tactical Surgeon, Operative 003, the last active survivor of the GTS program, the legend that no one could confirm until now. Recognition isn't always applause. Sometimes it's silence, a pause, a nod, a quiet truth exchange between people who have seen too much. There's power in that kind of acknowledgement, especially in a system where rank, title, and documentation are worshipped. But what happens when the best hands in the room don't wear a badge? Colonel Hale could have ordered a full investigation. He could have flagged her clearance, brought in federal security, or started formal inquiries. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "You've saved 4 people this week. That's more than most of our fully certified trauma team has done in 6 months." Draya didn't respond. She just kept organizing the gauze packs. "I'm not asking for your record," Hale added. "I just want to know if you're going to disappear again." She looked up quietly. "I didn't come here to hide. I came here because people still die when things go quiet, and I know how to work in the quiet." Word of the wrist injection spread across the night shift like gospel, but not as gossip, not as rumor, as reverent whispers among medical professionals. She found a way to counteract airway failure in 7 seconds. That wasn't even on the protocol list. No hesitation, just precision. They didn't call her Dr. Velez. They started calling her something else, softly with respect. The shadow surgeon. And still she refused every offer for advancement. She turned down staff promotions, public recognition, even private commendation. She simply asked to stay on nights, where there were fewer eyes, fewer questions, where the patients came in broken and sometimes still had a chance. That's the strange thing about real skill. You can't always trace it. You don't find it on paper. You feel it when everyone else is panicking and one person isn't. When the room tilts into chaos, and one pair of hands moves like they've done this 100 times in the dark. Specter 3 never needed applause. She just needed enough light to find the vein, and enough time, 4 minutes maybe, to make the difference between death and another chance. It was nearly 2 a.m. Colonel Marcus Hale waited in the staff lounge. Coffee long gone cold, a quiet hum from the ceiling lights keeping him company. Draya Velez had just finished her rounds. She walked in slowly, the way someone does when they know a conversation can't be avoided anymore. He didn't ask right away. He just gestured to the chair across from him. Draya sat, removed her gloves, and waited. "I read everything," Hale said. "The old logs, the redacted pages, what little was left of the GTS archives." She didn't blink, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. So he continued. "Specter 3, Ghost Tactical Surgeon, active from 2012 to 2017. Mission record, classified. Survival rate, unmatched." Draya finally looked at him. Her voice was low, controlled. "We were embedded with teams that weren't supposed to be found, operating in zones that didn't exist. If something went wrong, we had no backup, no airlift, no evac. Just what we could carry, what we could remember, what we could invent." She paused. "I once held a soldier's artery shut with my fingers for 43 minutes, in a cave, under fire." Colonel Hale listened in silence, no follow-up questions. "Because how do you ask someone why they kept going when no one was coming?" she continued. "Sometimes we'd go in with no electricity, no sterilization, no monitors, just instinct and whatever hadn't broken in the last fight. I've stitched wounds with fishing line, used fire-heated steel for cauterization, performed emergency thoracotomies in silence because sound would have gotten us killed." She looked at her hands. "You don't forget how a chest feels when it's collapsing. You learn to hear it with your fingers." Marcus Hale had seen enough war to know when someone was telling the truth, and he knew Draya wasn't trying to impress him. She was remembering, and every memory carried a name she probably hadn't said in years. People she saved, people she couldn't, and now here she was, working the night shift at a hospital no one important paid attention to. No title, no authority, no complaints. So he asked her the question everyone else had avoided. "Why come back at all?" Draya took a long breath. "Because the quiet here, it's different. Out there, the silence meant you were alone. It meant you might die. Here, it means people still have a chance. It means I have time, a hallway, a working bag of saline, a full cabinet. That's luxury." She smiled faintly. "I don't need a rank. I just need to get to the patient in time. Some people chase recognition, others run from it, and a rare few. They've already earned more than the system could ever offer, so they simply keep going, quietly, purposefully, for the ones who still need them, because real purpose doesn't require a title. It just requires a reason to show up." In the days that followed, Colonel Hale didn't submit a report. He didn't call higher command, didn't file for verification. Instead, he made a simple change. He called a closed-door meeting with the hospital's critical care educators. "Starting immediately," he told them, "we're revising our trauma response training modules. I want a new column in the procedural charts, marked V method." They asked him what that meant. He simply said, "Watch what Draya does, then teach it." They studied her like a living field manual. When Draya modulated ventilator pressure manually, trauma residents took notes. When she corrected a collapsed line with tape and reflex timing, they added it to the simulator. When she broke protocol to save a man's airway using pressure point mapping, senior nurses debated whether it should be standard. Eventually, no one questioned the results anymore. They just called it the Draya protocol. And the more they adopted it, the more patients lived. She never asked for any of it. In fact, when Hale informed her of the internal shift, she replied, "Please don't put my name on anything." He smiled. "Too late. It already saved 4 more people this week." She didn't smile back, but she nodded. That was all she needed. Behind the scenes, the culture of Fort Clayton began to shift. More senior staff started taking their night shifts seriously, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to learn what she knew. Junior medics stopped mocking the gray-scrubbed robot. Now they watched her with quiet reverence, the same way soldiers watch a scout who always makes it back alive. And what did Draya do through all of this? She kept working the 11 p.m., 7 a.m. shift, kept scrubbing trays, adjusting monitors, checking wrist pulses with her two fingers instead of a digital scanner, kept showing up for the people who couldn't wait for daylight. One night, Dr. Naomi Trent passed her in the hallway and stopped. "You know, I think you've changed this hospital more than anyone in years." Draya just tilted her head. "I didn't change anything. I just didn't let anyone die when I could help it." She walked away. That was her version of a thank you. Because some people don't wear titles. They wear the weight of memory, of lives saved, and some they still carry in silence. Specter 3 was never retired. Only her code name was. The mission? That still lived. Every night. In the quiet hum of machines. In the hands that still remembered how to save someone with nothing but timing and resolve. It was supposed to be over. The soldier had coded 43 minutes earlier. Blunt trauma to the head, skull fractures, no motor response, neurological scans flat. The ICU team had done everything, administered every drug, run every protocol. Now he lay motionless, his family already called in to say goodbye. Monitors still blinked, but without purpose. A nurse whispered, "Time of death, pending confirmation." Draya Velez entered quietly. No one asked her to. No one even noticed her at first. But she moved to the side of the bed and stood completely still, watching. She didn't check the machines. She looked at the man, his fingers, his pupils, his breathing pattern, or what was left of it. Then she did something no one expected. She reached for a pen and wrote on the transparent bedside board, "Reflex delay, 0.3s, window still open." A resident furrowed his brow. "What does that mean?" Draya didn't answer. She took a light pen and, with a precision that came from countless field triage nights, performed a series of reflex tests. Subtle, quick, almost imperceptible. Then she placed her hand on the soldier's chest. Not to restart anything, just to feel. And she waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then, his right index finger twitched. Not a spasm. Not a death reflex. It moved with intent. Gasps filled the room. The neurology consultant turned pale. The family broke down in tears. The same resident who had questioned her earlier whispered, "That's not possible." But Draya didn't react. She gently reached down and adjusted the oxygen line, monitored his pulse again, nodded to the nurse. "Keep monitoring. He's coming back." Then she turned and walked out, as if she had simply restocked a cabinet. In medicine, there are moments you can't teach. Moments where instinct outruns training. Where hands remember what books never wrote. Draya Velez was never licensed. Never published in journals. Never lectured in classrooms. But that day she caught what a dozen others missed. Hope. Not because she needed credit, but because she knew how to wait in silence for life to answer back. Colonel Hale later described her in a single sentence. She doesn't need to be called doctor. She just needs to be there when no one else knows what to do. And she was. Every night, every shift, still in gray scrubs, still unnamed in the official rosters, still showing up for the patients no one expected to survive. The touch that stayed wasn't just her hand on a chest. It was her refusal to let silence mean the end. Because sometimes, a single second more is enough to bring someone home. Draya Velez never asked to be seen. She just stayed in the room when others left. She listened longer, noticed more, and trusted something deeper than protocol, human instinct. And maybe that's the lesson here. In today's world, where credentials are everything, where titles dominate introductions, and where algorithms decide value, her story reminds us of something different. True skill doesn't always come with a name badge, and real service often wears silence, not applause. Think about that. How many people in your life, maybe a janitor, a night nurse, a veteran neighbor, hold knowledge that will never be printed in books, but has saved lives in ways no one will ever record? Draya's story is not just about medicine. It's about respect. Respect for quiet excellence. Respect for those who show up when it matters most. Respect for those who don't need recognition to do what's right. So here's our question to you. Have you ever known someone like Draya? Should hospitals and society do more to value unseen experience? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your story or your thoughts, or just your thanks to the invisible experts you've met in your life. And if this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share this video, because stories like these shouldn't be forgotten. Thanks for watching, and until next time, honor those who heal, even when the world isn't looking.